In 2026, the average 30-year-old buying a median home in America takes on $412,000 of debt. They call it the American dream. I want to show you why, for millions of people, it might actually be the worst financial decision they ever make. Here's a number that should stop you cold. If you take that same $412,000 and instead of putting it into a house, you rent a comparable place and invest the difference in a simple index fund, after 30 years you don't just break even, you end up with more money than the homeowner. Sometimes almost double. That sounds impossible. Everyone around you says renting is throwing money away. Your parents said it. Your grandparents said it. It's practically a religion in this country. But religions don't always survive contact with a spreadsheet. Let's start with a man named Robert Whitfield, a 34-year-old software engineer from Denver, Colorado. In 2019, Robert did what he was told to do. He saved for 6 years, scraped together a $60,000 down payment, and bought a $430,000 house. His mortgage payment, with taxes and insurance, came out to $2,800 a month. What nobody told Robert is what happens after you sign. The roof needed replacing in year 3, $14,000. The HVAC failed in a July heat wave, $9,000. Property taxes rose 11% in 4 years because his county reassessed home values. And then there was the thing nobody budgets for at all, euros. The 2 months his basement flooded and he couldn't sell, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but pay for repairs while his equity sat frozen in the walls around him. By 2026, Robert had put almost $90,000 into that house beyond his mortgage. Maintenance, repairs, taxes, insurance increases. His net worth on paper looked good. His actual liquid cash, almost nothing. He was in the truest sense of the phrase house poor. Now let's look at his college roommate, a woman named Priya Chandrasekaran, who made the opposite choice. Same city, same starting income. Priya rented a 2-bedroom apartment for $1,800 a month starting in 2019. That's $1,000 less than Robert's mortgage payment. She took that $1,000 difference, plus the $60,000 down payment she never had to make, and put every bit of it into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund. She never fixed a roof. She never argued with a contractor. When her water heater broke, she called her landlord and it was fixed by Thursday. But that's not the part that should shock you. By 2026, Priya's investment account had grown to just over $210,000. Compounding at an average market return of roughly 10% doesn't feel dramatic year to year. It feels almost boring, and that's exactly the trap. Boring is what compounding looks like right before it becomes extraordinary. This is where most people's assumptions break down completely. We're taught that a mortgage payment builds equity while rent disappears into a landlord's pocket. But that framing hides something economists call the opportunity cost of capital. Every dollar that goes into a down payment, into closing costs, into a new water heater, is a dollar that stops working for you in the market. A house doesn't just cost what you paid for it. It costs what that money could have become somewhere else. Here's where it gets even more uncomfortable if you already own a home. Zillow's own research puts the true cost of homeownership, a euro taxes, insurance, maintenance, and lost investment opportunity combined a euro at nearly 4% of a home's value every single year. On a $400,000 house, that's $16,000 a year, quietly leaving your pocket, mostly invisible because it doesn't show up as a single line item on any bill. Renters don't escape risk either. Rent goes up. Landlords sell. There's no guarantee of stability, and I'm not telling you renting is free of downsides. But the myth that renting is throwing money away while buying is building wealth simply does not survive the math in most major American cities in 2026, especially in markets like Denver, Austin, Seattle, and Los Angeles, where home prices have outpaced local wages for over a decade. Let's talk about interest rates, because this is the part almost nobody factors in correctly. In 2026, the average 30-year mortgage rate sits above 6.5%. That means on Robert's $430,000 loan, he pays close to $310,000 in interest alone over the life of the loan, assuming he never refinances. $310,000 paid to a bank for the privilege of borrowing money he could have avoided borrowing at all. In the first 7 years of a standard mortgage, the overwhelming majority of every payment goes to interest, not principal. Robert believed he was building equity every month. For most of a decade, he was mostly paying rent to a bank instead of a landlord, except the bank's rent came with a roof he had to fix himself. There's also a psychological cost that never appears in any calculator. Home ownership ties you to a location in a way that can quietly cost you a career. When Robert's company offered him a promotion that required relocating to Austin in 2023, he turned it down. Selling would have meant paying 6% in agent commissions, covering the remaining balance on a loan that had barely amortized, and absorbing closing costs that would have erased 2 years of appreciation. He stayed in a job that plateaued because the house made moving too expensive to justify. Priya, meanwhile, took a better-paying remote position in 2024 and simply gave notice on her lease. No commissions, no closing costs, no frozen equity. She was gone in 60 days with an extra $18,000 a year in her pocket. So why does almost nobody talk about this? Because the industries around homeownership are enormous. Real estate agents, mortgage lenders, home insurance companies, and an entire cultural mythology built on the idea that a house is the safest investment a person can make. Nobody profits from you renting and investing the difference. An entire economy profits from you buying. Think about the incentives for a moment. A real estate agent earns a commission only when a transaction happens, so their advice will always tilt toward buying, selling, upsizing, refinancing. A mortgage lender earns interest only if you borrow, so their calculators are built to make monthly payments look affordable, not to show you the $300,000 in interest waiting at the end of the road. Even financial media benefits, because buy now before prices rise further, generates far more clicks than the math doesn't favor you this year. Nobody is lying to you exactly. They just have no reason to show you the other side of the spreadsheet. And here is the number that actually matters, the one that changes how you should think about this decision for the rest of your life. The break-even point €1, the number of years you'd need to stay in a home before buying beats renting and investing €1, averages between 7 and 9 years in most U.S. metro areas today. If you know you're staying in one place for 15, 20, 30 years, buying can absolutely make sense. But if there's a real chance you move in 5 years for a job, a relationship, a life change, renting isn't the compromise. It's the smarter play mathematically every single time. Robert didn't do anything wrong. He followed advice that was true for his parents' generation, in a housing market that looked completely different from ours. Priya didn't do anything extraordinary either. She just ran the numbers instead of trusting the folklore. The real lesson here isn't renting versus buying. It's this €1. Every financial decision you inherited from your parents was built for their economy, not yours. Home prices in 2026 have detached from wages in a way that simply didn't exist in 1985 or even 2005. The rules changed, most people's beliefs didn't. So before you sign the next 30-year mortgage because it's what you're supposed to do, run your own numbers. Calculate your break-even point. Ask yourself honestly how long you'll actually stay. Because the house isn't the dream, financial freedom is the dream. And sometimes, the fastest way there isn't through a front door with your name on the deed. Sometimes it's through a decision quiet enough that nobody around you will understand it until years later, when the numbers finally speak for themselves.